Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.
Hello everyone, welcome to the first Road to Cheltenham of the new year, and we are ringing the changes here in the studio because I am joined on my left by Nick Luck, who is standing in for Ruby Walsh this week. Nick, you are very welcome to this parish.
And you know that it's not possible to stand in for Ruby Walsh, so square peg, round hole, but very happy to be on your show.
I'm really delighted that you are here, and between the two of us, we're going to sort of muddle through together and talk about the amazing action that we've had over Christmas.
One of the best weeks jump racing I can ever remember. I don't think that's an exaggeration. 4 monstrously impressive performances. Brighter Days Ahead, if you like, Constitution Hill, Segino, Galopin des Champs. I'm sure I've forgotten a few as well.
I think those are the key ones. And isn't this like how racing used to be?
Yes, I think so. And isn't it the case that whatever tinkering is taking place in Britain and Ireland as regards the programme book is beginning to work? We'd have never have seen Ballyburn and Segino but for the fact that Willie Mullins was forced into doing that.
Yes, by the deletion of the 2-miler at the Leopardstown Christmas Festival. Do you think Ireland are as happy with Britain as that?
Probably not. But of course, we might not have seen Segino in a race like that were it not for the fact that Nicky Henderson didn't have a nice soft novice chase to be able to run him in first.
True that, and the smaller novice chase programme here in Britain is forcing horses together. But we digress, because we are focusing very keenly in this show on the established chasers and the established hurdlers, and it is the hurdlers where we start. And I think the obvious place to start, Nick, is with the Neville Hotels hurdle and this demolition by Brighter Days Ahead.
You don't often see performances on the flat or under national hunt rules which are just shock and awe, where the writing is on the wall from such an early stage. And this is what Brighter Days Ahead has wanted all her career, a sustained, searching gallop, not just to suit her, but to take her rivals out of a zone where they feel completely comfortable, and that's exactly what you got. Perfect for her. King of Kingsfield almost couldn't go fast enough for her. You see her natural enthusiasm. By contrast, State Man is slovenly there, ponderous throughout, and could never really get on an even keel.
I think you can see that Paul Townend isn't entirely happy, and he said so afterwards from a very early stage.
Even here, you think he's niggling a little bit. That's the one significant error from King of Kingsfield, but he's able to maintain his momentum just long enough. Jack Kennedy must have been watching on, thinking, this is what would always love to have sat on, and in the end, it was Sam Ewing who was the able deputy. Yeah,
and you've got to doff your cap to Sam Ewing. He's been given a load of high-profile opportunities. He seized them with both hands.
Yeah, and just a slightly careless leap at the last, but I think it's more a measure of the fact that she's still got plenty of run in her. Look at State Man here. He's struggling to get by King of Kingsfield, who's walking. He's on vapours at this stage. He should at least have been plodding past him a little bit more meaningfully.
And, you know, lots of people have said, has Paul Townend given these horses too much to do? Well, if his horse was going well, then yes, but it clearly wasn't going well. And when we'll switch to the head-on after we see, rightly, Sam Ewing's celebrations on Brighter Days Ahead after this 30-length destruction of her field, we'll see that State Man is still laboured. Now, Paul Townend tries to ride him out for second, but Winter Fog, rated 150, hard-ridden admittedly, gets past him.
Exactly, and I think if you go back through the career of Brighter Days Ahead, there was so much that signalled that this man, Gordon Elliott, has always expected her to do something of this magnitude.
Absolutely. He has made no secret of the regard in which he holds this mare. But I suppose after the excitement of that day, and I think everybody was just, you know, walking on air for a while, you then start thinking, OK, so what does this add up to? You know, is this a performance that she's ever going to be able to repeat? Is it something that you saw coming? Let's have a look at how Timeform see the progress of her career. And I must thank Tom Hislop, and in particular, but also Dan Barber, for their help with a number of visualisations of horses' careers. And this is what Brighter Days Ahead's improvement looked like.
And the point is, if Brighter Days Ahead's career was just a flat line and then a spike, you'd think, well, that's clearly aberrant. That performance doesn't make sense. But it's in keeping with a sharp curve of improvement as Connections have begun to understand more about her and understand more about her requirements. And on that performance, surely you say now, 4th best performance ever from a mare, according to Timeform in the modern era, she must go to the champion hurdle.
And that was at 167 there, and there's the context that you're talking about, the great, the mighty Dawn Run at the top, who managed to be a top-rated mare both over fences and hurdles, and there is the roll of honour. You can see Honeysuckle there on 165. Quevega's got a few mentions recently, 164. Apple's Jade, who will come up later in the show, on 162. 167, Brighter Days Ahead, who's still in training and has an opportunity to improve upon that, is about as conservative as they could possibly have gone, isn't it?
Exactly, because of that 31-length winning margin. They could have gone much higher, but they've got to keep things within the realms of reality, within the realms of race standards as well. Worth bearing in mind that Willie Mullins had won 11 of the past 14 editions of this race, and Gordon Elliott was breaking a winning streak of 6. You know, you'd think Stateman, who was on a hat-trick in here, would have been ripe and ready to run his race. Not to be.
100th Grade 1 win as well for Gordon Elliott. Really significant week for him. Right, Nick has already mentioned Jack Kennedy. The prophet that is Jack Kennedy envisaged this. This is what he had to say after winning the Morgiana.
Yeah, going the other way and probably with a lead, coming off a strong pace. I think that's when you'll see the best of her, yeah.
So that's all it takes to sum it up.
But you know what? This has been forecast all the way back when? 19th of October 2023 at Thurles, Jack Kennedy. She'll be exciting in a race run at a strong gallop with something to aim at. Exciting, he was saying. October 2023. This is Jack Kennedy, who takes Laconic to a whole new level.
That is true. But even Jack Kennedy was saying after the Morgiana, he started talking about the Champion Hurdle. He said he'd been thinking it. Earlier on, Gordon had been talking about the Champion Hurdle, and then he started to back away. Yeah. So what did he and Michael O'Leary say about the Champion Hurdle to Gary O'Brien last Sunday?
Listen, I was nervous. I thought we were going too fast then earlier. I thought the boys got the fractions wrong, but told him go out and make it a test. We know she stays.
You said Mare's Hurdle earlier on. Surely it's the champion now.
Mare's Hurdle.
Stop that. Gordon was talking earlier on about going for the Mare's Hurdle after today, but surely you're going to run her in the Champion Hurdle after that. I know you like to go where you have the best chance of winning at Cheltenham, but it'd be a shame not to see her in the champion, surely, wouldn't it?
Well, firstly, let's see how she comes out of this today. Like, you know, there's no point in making plans. You make a plan for Cheltenham, and the next thing you get a call in the morning she's done attending or something. So just enjoy today. I would have said, you know, if she was beaten today, we'd have certainly gone for the Mare's Hurdle. At least now I think she's entitled. We'll consider the Champion Hurdle. But, you know, odds on, I'd still favour the Mare's Hurdle, but we'll discuss it with Gordon and Eddie. We'll come to a decision, but a lot will depend on how she is in the couple of weeks before Cheltenham in March.
And thus it was left to Eddie O'Leary to play pantomime villain on your show on the podcast on Monday.
Yeah, I thought Michael held out reasonable possibilities she would appear in the Champion Hurdle, but when I spoke to Eddie on Monday, I was at Taunton, he was back at home in Ireland. Constitution Hill's a very talented horse. Stateman's a very, very talented horse on his day. You've just beaten him twice. Once by 31 lengths. It'll be a very good race. This is the key line, isn't it? We'd like a winner in Cheltenham. And then he made a very good argument about why we should support the Mayor's programme, with which we all agree. But in this instance, when you've got a mare that talented, you might have the Champion Hurdle, if not at your mercy, at least within your grasp.
Yeah, we will talk about that in greater detail in a moment. Let's find out what you think after we've heard what Gordon thinks, what Jack thinks and what the O'Leary thinks. We'll start off with the poll. We simply asked, where should Brighter Days Ahead go at the Cheltenham Festival? Overwhelmingly, fans of sport, 63% want to go for the Champion Hurdle.
But 37% of fans of the sport still want her to run in the Mayor's Hurdle, which begs the question, what do people want to see? Are they more satisfied just by having their heroes with a 1 by their name, or are they more intrigued by what we like to think of as a horse race?
Ryan has a very strong view. Let's see what Ryan's view is. He admits straight away it's pocket talk.
Oh, fair enough.
but he says it would be unfair if everyone is saying she's going to go to the Mares on punters if it then turns up somewhere else.
But not all those 31% surely have got a good position for the Mayor's Hurdle.
You wouldn't have thought so. I'm baffled by people who don't want, you know, top elite sport. Ryan's also making the point about Stateman being well below his destiny. It's hard to gauge what she achieved, which is fair.
That's true, but the clock doesn't lie. And the time was very good. Now, admittedly, it was a bit of a time trial, but the time was very good.
Dara has a strong view, and I think this more aligns with you. It's truly disappointing for the festival if she runs in the Mares, because she's the only one who can get close to Constitution Hill, he says.
I just think if you want the very best hurdlers of a generation running against each other, you want her to run in the Champion Hurdle. That, of course, presupposes that the Mares' Hurdle doesn't end up being the best race of the whole meeting if she and Lossiemouth turn up, more of which in a moment.
Absolutely, we've got a theory on that. Stuart gives us a reality check. Seriously? Are we seriously asking if the horse who has put up the best hurdling display of the season, yes, and has now beaten last year's champion twice, we're going to question whether she should run in the Champion Hurdle? Seriously?
See, I think Michael O'Leary, in that interview, gave every indication that he quite fancied the idea.
Yes. And I was interested by what Eddie said to you in your podcast, where he said the plan had been to go chasing with Brighter Days Ahead this season, and he thought they were going chasing, Gordon thought they were going chasing, and in a democracy, 2 votes were outvoted by the one Michael O'Leary vote.
Gordon Elliott, though, again, go back through the quotes. 9th of April 2023, nearly 2 years ago, she is a seriously good mare. 10th of November 2023, she is a proper mare. 11th of February 2024, she's very, very good, and I don't say that about many.
They don't, actually. Gordon Elliott in particular.
He's pretty realistic.
He's been trying to keep a lid on it with Brighter Days Ahead, but I think you could see from those scenes in the Winners' Enclosure quite how delighted he was. Let's go back to your views. John's got a view. Now, John's an advocate of the mares because he points out that she was comprehensively beaten by Golden Ace, who's only rated in the low 140s, but...
Well, I think Golden Ace is well handicapped off her current mark, and again, we'll discuss that a little bit. She was beaten by Golden Ace's flat pace, I thought, in the novice hurdle, where she was too keen and didn't have the pace to run that she needed. I thought she was beaten by the way the race worked out rather than anything obvious with the track.
Yeah, I agree. And they've worked out as well how to get the best out of her here over 2 miles, I think. And I think also, when we were talking earlier about the improvement that she has made, I think the fact that she has become more mature, she's more willing to settle, she's more willing to be ridden in different ways, although clearly she prefers to have a lead. And also she's got a big frame. Maybe she's also put some strength into it as well.
Yeah, she should be coming to peak now, shouldn't she? And it's clearly been a work in progress. You can see from everything that's been said about her. Let's
move on to Andrew Joseph and what he has to say. The fact that there's talk of which race you go for is everything that's wrong with the festival at the moment.
Well, in fairness, they have tried. Maybe they haven't tried hard enough. There are things that could be done to ensure that she did run in the Champion Hurdle. I'm not quite sure what the correct solution is. I think putting lots of weird and wonderful conditions in the race, high ratings, bans, and you can't have won a Grade 1 in such a long time or whatever, I think that's just going to end up confusing us more. If you want to ensure that or do your best to incentivise mares like this to run the Champion Hurdle, I think you just have to create a bigger differential between the importance of the Champion Hurdle and the importance of the Mares' Hurdle. Probably with money. So a bigger differential in prize money between the 2 races and maybe a differential in race status.
Oh, you mean Grade 1, Grade 2?
Maybe.
I suppose... I know you rightly made the point that Jockey Club Racecourses have made a lot of changes to the 2025 festival, many of them very positive. I think some of them have been less well received, notably by Eddie O'Leary. They did consider saying that if you'd won a Grade 1, you can't run in the Mares' Hurdle, and then they looked at what that would actually impact on the field, and the race that would be left behind would be unsustainable as a Grade 1, I think. So I think they've got to work out whether having a Grade 1 at the festival is necessary to maintain the overwhelmingly positive effect that the Mares programme has had on our sport, in that we have mares actively jumping obstacles rather than going straight to the breeding sheds or being retired after 2 bumper runs.
Which I completely support as somebody who's tried to breed horses. I would completely support that. The point is, you've got to ask yourself, does that mares race at the moment accurately reflect the programme of mares races that lead up to it? And you could argue at the moment it's a bit of an outlier. So I actually think you could have a very viable final-style mares race at the Cheltenham Festival with a place there for mares who've been performing creditably at a pretty high but not absolutely elite level for most of the season. And that could coexist quite happily alongside the Champion Hurdle.
I personally also think that they considered, if you've won a Grade 1, I think it should have been an open Grade 1 within a certain period if they were going to consider that.
The problem is, the more of these kind of conditions you put in there, the more it makes your brain hurt. And if it makes our brains hurt, then it's going to start losing the fans, isn't it?
But life is complicated, isn't it?
True. Too complicated.
I'm a favour of the complicated. Horse racing is complicated. What did Gavin have to say? Let's find out from him. He says, with a time form rating of 167, with a £7 mares allowance, that's a key point, Constitution Hill will need to be at his best to beat her.
Well, he might not need to be at his best, which is outstanding, extraterrestrial, the best hurdler some of us have ever seen, but he might need to be a bit better than he was able to be at Kempton.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's right. And that also relies on Brighterdaysahead being actually able to reproduce it at Cheltenham. When I was chatting to Ruby Walsh about that, I did wonder whether it was easier to execute those kind of tactics on a flatter track and whether the undulations of Cheltenham make it more difficult. And also, the ground, King of Kingsfield fell in a hole on heavy ground in the county hurdle last season.
But I'm inclined to agree with Ruby that there's no reason why she shouldn't knock in at least a mid-160s performance at Cheltenham. It's in keeping with everything we know about her and about the progress of her career.
OK. Christopher Field has mentioned Apple's Jade here, and he suggests that she wasn't suited to Cheltenham, and I think it applies to Brighterdaysahead. It's too soon, that, isn't it? Too soon?
I don't really follow that logic, other than the fact that they're very talented mares who've won races by a long way, and they race in the same colours. You know, they're certainly not the same horses physically. This is Apple's Jade bolting up in the 2019 Irish Champion Hurdle, after which they were kind of forced to go Champion Hurdle route, having got beaten, ironically, in the mares race the year before.
Yes.
But she just completely bombed out in the Champion Hurdle. I mean, this is not the run of a mare who didn't handle Cheltenham. This is the run of a mare who didn't turn up.
Absolutely. I mean, that's Espoir d'Alain's race, but, you know, Lorena's there, you know, Silver Streak, Mellon, she should have been competitive with the likes of those. I was interested in what Christopher had to say, keep her career going as long as possible. When you have to run that hard over a trip that is probably her minimum, 2 miles, you can't do that too often if you want to have a long-running career where you explore fences as well, which is clearly what they want to do.
Yeah, there's Eddie O'Leary, the interesting part of their interview, was saying they would definitely wanted to go over fences next season. And you know, they're starting to think about her maybe as a Gold Cup mare in due course. But then wouldn't it be a shame if they couldn't try and replicate Dawn's run? You know, and we've heard that so many times with mares, haven't we, over the last few years? Yeah,
it would be incredible to have that. I just feel so lucky to have watched Dawn run. Right, so I think we've poured over Brighterdaysahead. We will come back to a vis-a-vis Lossiemouth and which race in a moment, but let's discuss why did Statement underperform? Now, plenty of people immediately afterwards criticised Paul Townend and said that, you know, he just allowed the others to get too far ahead.
Hang on,
it already.
He'd have had to have got off and pushed to get him any closer, wouldn't he? I mean, he's been beaten 31 lengths or 30 more.
And the point is, if you're ridden off patiently a strong pace like that, what you should then do is run through strongly at the finish, and he wasn't able to do that.
Exactly that, because he's a strong stayer at 2 miles.
Let's have a look at what Timeform say he achieved. And again, thanks to Tom Hislop for this.
Not a right lot by the looks of it.
No, I mean, look at that. I suppose what that shows is what a consistent horse he is and how he performs at a very high level, but just below brilliant.
Look at underneath the numbers: soft, good to soft, 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 heavy, soft, soft, and then good ground. And then good ground where a couple of horses have really, you know, gone after it from the outset.
It's odd, isn't it? Because if you looked at the two of them in the paddock, and I was chatting with Kevin Blake about this, you know, you look at Brighterdaysahead and her physique, and you look at Statement and his physique, and which one's not going to handle good ground?
Doesn't always follow.
No, it doesn't. And it isn't necessarily the ground either. It's just something to throw into the mix. The other suggestion, of course, is the form of WP Mullins. And we have...
Good job we're doing this today. And not 48 hours ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. What, with his 6-timer on New Year's Day? Yeah.
Because at least we can kind of revisit that theory.
15 winners he's had since Christmas Day. This is his December record, though. So take a look at his form in December 2023 as compared with 2024. And the strike rate is quite diminished, as is the percentage of rivals beaten and the number of horses running to form. And as well as this sort of overall statistical view, and Timeform takes a lot into account in terms of running to form. It doesn't just say, oh, you were £2 below and therefore you haven't, whatever. There are lots of context that they take into account, how the race was run, all of those kind of things. But there's also some anecdotal stuff. Daddy Longlegs was withdrawn, coughing. King Alexander listened to our fortune with a temperature. Did I ask you that with an infection? Sea of Sands ended up being clinically abnormal after he ran. So there are some anecdotal suggestions that maybe things aren't absolutely 100%.
Yeah, and this time of year you'll find some signs of ill health in just about every yard in Britain and Ireland. I mean, Paul Nicholls has said recently, yeah, one or two, not quite sure about that, not quite sure, can't find anything specific, and then suddenly has two really impressive winners the next day. Just because some horses in the yard, their immune systems are sufficiently compromised that they're picking up all the bugs that are going around, others will be much more robust, and I think that's probably the way to look at it.
And from the yard of the scale of Willie Mullins as well, how can you from the outside possibly know? It's a fool's errand as a punter to try and judge it, isn't it, don't you think?
I was involved in a horse that ran the other day that came from a yard that had I think 6 winners in the previous week and was going great guns. Horse looked a picture of health. Pulled up with a circuit to run, scope 5 out of 5 dirty. Sometimes you just don't know till they've run.
Stateman, do you fancy him to bounce back?
Well, I think he's going to have more on his plate this year, even if he does bounce right back. I mean, you saw that time form graph was perfectly illustrative of a horse that can run low 160s figures almost every time if he's at the peak of health. He actually probably performed slightly below that in last season's Champion Hurdle, and he'll certainly have to do an awful lot better than he did in the 2024 Champion Hurdle to be winning this year's race if 2 of Constitution Hill, Lossiemouth or Brighterdaysahead show up.
And he's never really been functioning at his best at Cheltenham either. Do you expect to see him in the Irish Champion Hurdle?
You wouldn't see why not, because I think they want to get a good run under his belt before they go to Cheltenham, wouldn't you?
Whereas after a big run, you might not see Brighterdaysahead. But...
Well, that was an interesting difference of opinion as well, because Gordon Elliott said we'll probably go to the Dublin Racing Festival. Eddie O'Leary said the next day she'll have an entry, but she probably won't run. So...
watch this space. Right.
What does Michael think?
We're going to take a short pause, and when we return, we will talk about Constitution Hill.
OK, gents, next item on the agenda is we need to shoot something to use in the ad slot for the Road to Cheltenham.
The what?
Road to Cheltenham ad slot?
The Road to Cheltenham?
Yeah, Paddy Ware sponsored the Road to Cheltenham on Racing TV. You should probably know that.
How much is that costing us?
Doesn't matter.
Ah, come on, you know I'm on the Road to Cheltenham.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. We already know you're on the Road to Cheltenham.
Oh, thanks, Tom. So now you want the viewers to endure me for the show and the ad slot?
Well, we can't afford to bring in anyone else.
Because the amount of bloody money we're paying to sponsor the thing.
Oh, forget it.
Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham. Apparently. First I've heard.
It's Boxing Day, it's Kempton, and he's back. Constitution Hill has beaten the young pretender Lossiemouth, and also Burdett Road has run a big race.
Burdett Road ran a huge race. Constitution Hill, 5 of the gears are absolutely there. Is the 6th? And that's the big question. And to what extent does this really tell us? Also, Lossiemouth, you can't have it both ways. You either believe that she wasn't at her best and she's capable of delivering a lot more, in which case, why wouldn't you go and take on Constitution Hill again? Or you think that this is as good as she is. You can't have it both ways.
I think she really was unsuited by the track. We'll go into some more details about that in a few moments' time. There's where Constitution Hill really showed off and took a risk, didn't he, at the 4th?
So many of the tools are still intact, aren't they? Most notably that quicksilver jumping that is better than just about any other hurdler you've ever seen. And 9/10 of this race was exemplary from Constitution Hill, which put him in this position. Now we get to the business end of the race, and if you just watch the race from here on in, you'd say, oh, well, maybe he's not quite back to his imperious best, and actually Lossiemouth's run really well, and given that she's the improver, why couldn't she improve again if he's not getting any better? This is the first time he'd had a smack in a race since his hurdling debut at Sandown 3 years previously.
Wasn't he miles clear?
Yeah, he was 10 clear at that point.
Right. Educative, I suppose.
Yeah. You can see why those close to 7 barrows felt relieved, and you can see why there were a few well-chosen words after the race, because there'd been a bit of a siege mentality. But the question we need to ask ourselves in the cold light of day is, does he need to improve upon that to win another Champion Hurdle?
I think we can allow ourselves a sentence of it's great to see him back, isn't it? Wasn't it great?
And you know, whilst you might not like all the yak about Constitution Hill, and I understand why people find it wearisome, what you have to love is the horse himself. Because his temperament has clearly enabled him to do what he's done, face huge long absences, also huge absences, year-long absences, and come back and win off layoffs all the time, and show that kind of enthusiasm for so much of the race. He's a very generous horse, isn't he, the way he races?
Well, he puts a lot into every race,
Exactly.
doesn't he?
Exactly. He's not a hard horse to root for.
No. But you mentioned the cold, hard light of day. Let's have a look at how Timeform pinned it. So There we have his peak performance. We'll always have the 2022 Supreme, Nick. We'll also always have the Champion Hurdle from 2023. But since then, we should point out that he's won his last 3 starts without reaching those dizzying standards. But that's where we are.
And that 146, which was the 2023 Christmas Hurdle, he simply didn't have an opportunity to show himself off because the race was run at such a pedestrian pace. And we know from what he did at the end of the race that that could be significantly upgraded.
But that's not the case last time. We had a well-run race courtesy of Burdett Road, and we'll talk about him in a moment. He made a significant mistake, as you just saw, at that final hurdle. Would have finished closer other than that. And, of course, everybody is pinning their hopes on him improving to some degree or hugely, depending on their stance. Let's have a look what you think. You'll see that lots of the roadies are quite split on this. Now, regular correspondent Simon Sanders says that he'll improve plenty. He may not recapture his very best form. Lossiemouth has never gone that quick before, was found out at the trip of the track. She'll improve, but I can see him somewhere in the 170, 173 area, and that'll be good enough.
My most interesting conversation with Nicky Henderson about Constitution Hill took place 2 days afterwards, when I said to him, were you always confident you could get him to Kempton? And he said, as soon as he'd done the piece of work where Nico said, I've got him back, I then worked out how many bits of work I needed to pump into him between there and Kempton. And he almost intimated that he had to rush him and he had to he had to push him as hard as he dared. He had to get the elastic as taut as he could possibly do without it snapping. And so, you know, the inference I drew was, OK, you've had to rush to get him there. If you have your perfect preparation as you'd ideally design it between now and Cheltenham, then, yeah, you have a reasonable case to suggest that he should be finishing his race out even stronger than he did at Kempton.
For that reason, the fact that he's had to push a bit to get to the Christmas Hurdle, I think it's unlikely he was going to turn in the International. He's only twice in his whole career run within about a month.
Did you sense much enthusiasm from Nicky for that? I didn't.
Not really. 3 times,
Not really.
I should say. Sorry, 3 times in his whole
I suppose
career.
the only thing is that if it looks like he can turn up and have a lap of honour and beat 266 to 1 shots, which is possible. Well, they obviously wouldn't be 266 to 1 shots, but you know what I mean. Two horses vastly his inferior, then they might be tempted. But I didn't sense much enthusiasm for it.
No, I suspect it will probably be straight there for him. Romford Tipster has a view. Now, he is sure that Constitution Hill will come on a huge amount. He says that it's just because it's Constitution Hill and people love to hate, that's why they think he isn't going to improve. Now, I love Constitution Hill, and the reason why I think he may not come on a huge amount is because in a well-run race like that, you'd have to be pretty much there. Otherwise, you're going to get exposed, aren't you?
Well, unless you're so brilliant that you can kind of get away with it. And that still exists in the back of our mind. I realise that Supreme Novices and that Champion Hurdle are relatively distant memories now, but they were off the chart good. I mentioned that that's the first time he'd had a smack since his hurdling debut at Cheltenham when he was 10 lengths clear. I remember when he won at Aintree over 2.5 miles, and everyone said, we were sort of saying, well, he wasn't that impressive, was he? So Andrew Blair-White and I went back and watched it this afternoon, and Nico barely moved his elbows that day. He was still winning it hard on the bridle, even if it hadn't been as brilliant as the race before.
Jordan Lang is the next person we're going to talk about, and he says that this is the first time that Nico de Boinville has had to get serious with this horse, and he's saying that it just depends for the rematch, or the putative rematch between him and Lossiemouth, how much improvement there is to come from her. He can't see a scenario in the Champion Hurdle where it's not run flat out. Well, it wasn't last year, and even the one that Constitution Hill won really showcased his speed from the home turn. Yeah,
funnily enough, I always thought that if they'd run a pacemaker Brighterdaysahead start for Constitution Hill in that Champion Hurdle, that he might have been even more impressive.
Well, I mean, that's essentially what happened unintentionally in the Supreme, isn't it?
John Bond made his running for him.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and
fair pacemaker.
I was trying to remember who was third the other day. It was Kilcrut, wasn't it? And was it Dysart Dynamo as well, helping to take them along? But if Constitution Hill is on song, and if Brighterdaysahead was there and they have the same setup, he'd love that, wouldn't he?
I would have thought so.
Yeah,
would have thought
absolutely love it. He's got both things. He's got a turn of foot, but he can also go apace at a sustainedly well-run 2 mile. I mean, at his best, Constitution Hill does have potentially everything. Finally, let's have a look at what Ben has to say. He is really confident about Constitution Hill. Lossiemouth can't go the pace. Brighterdaysahead can go as fast as she likes. It'll simply set it up for Constitution Hill. Remember the Supreme? We'll never forget the Supreme. We'll always have that.
One of the great performances of all time.
Now, you wanted to have a look at how Constitution Hill finished off his race in the Christmas hurdle, comparing 2023 with 2024.
Yeah. Because, as I said, in 2023, you couldn't put a big figure on the performance because he didn't beat Rubo by as far as the form book wanted him to. But his finishing speed percentage here was 112.57, and they ran a full 7 seconds slower on the left than they did on the right, which shows you it was a much more sustained pace in the 2024 Christmas hurdle. And Constitution Hill has had to run much harder to record a time of 3:45.6. Now, he still produced a finishing speed percentage of 105.9%, which is still hugely creditable in a race run at that tempo. It was a very good performance on the clock this year, and Timeform rate the ground this year just on the soft side of good, as opposed to just good last year. Now, the official going description was good both times, but Timeform say the ground was slower this year, yet the overall time was 7 seconds quicker.
There is no doubt that there was a lot of merit to Constitution Hill's performance, but this puts it into some context, I think. Let's have a look at how Timeform put it all together. And this final graph, which brings together Stateman's career performances, Constitution Hill and Brighterdaysahead, and also factors in, crucially, that £7 mare's allowance for Brighterdaysahead. This shows how much Constitution Hill is going to have to improve from where he's at the moment.
But even if you say that he wasn't at his best and he's entitled to come back to his very best at the Cheltenham Festival, just look exactly how close that 174 of Brighterdaysahead is to Constitution Hill's peak ratings. Yes. Whatever way you slice this, he's got a much more serious rival on his hands than he has had perhaps for his entire career, and maybe even two more serious rivals.
Yeah, if she turns up. That is the key point. But how about Lossiemouth and the case for Lossiemouth? Now, a couple of days after she ran at Kempton, Kevin Blake put out a really interesting article on his At the Races column. And here is the first mile metrics from Race IQ. And this goes from the furlong marker to the mile marker in all of these races. Lossiemouth's sectionals at this point, and also the leader in the 23 champion hurdle and the 24 champion hurdle. And it shows that definitively Lossiemouth has never been that fast in the early part of her race in her life, but also crucially that certainly the last two champions haven't been run that way anyway.
Exactly that. And just to add to that, the last three times Lossiemouth's been asked to run up to the Christmas hurdle, she was running over even further. She was running over 2.5 on soft, heavy and yielding ground. So she really was unaccustomed to that pace.
Yes.
So is it reasonable to expect, now that she's had one go at it, that she'll be a bit more sharp and switched on next time?
I think so. Certainly Willie Mullins was coming round to that idea, which we'll have a look at in a moment. But first we should mention Burdett Road, because he's almost overlooked in this race, and some people have used him to pull down the value of the champion hurdle form. Well, he's just an improver, isn't he?
But this goes to show you the standards we're now setting for modern-day jumpers. If you'd had this conversation 20, 30, 40 years ago and said, right, in third, in a creditable third, but well beaten, and never really looked like winning the race.
And with a terrible mistake at the last.
Was a horse rated 109 on the flat. You know, not far short of Group 3 class on the flat, who thumped Military Academy, a good horse, by the way, by as many lengths as you like in the listed Galopin stakes, and who had improved probably 10 to 14 pounds from Michael Bell to James Owen on the flat in the intervening period with normal maturity. You cannot simply dismiss that horse as a, mezzanine-level animal who any horse should dismiss. And bear in mind, his only defeat in his juvenile season came at the hands of Sergino. We'll talk about how good he could be later in the show.
Yeah, I think he was shown to very good effect, and who's to say he won't get better? He's 33 to 1, though, according to Paddy Power, for the champion hurdle. These, of course, are anti-post prices. Now, in my column, I have put up Lossiemouth at 7 to 1 on anti-post terms. 7 to 1 available in a couple of places. 6 to 1 also available. I'd be quite happy with that as well. William Hill and 888 Sport have gone non-runner, no bets.
So what price do you get non-runner, no, or non-runner money back for Lossiemouth?
7 to 2. I think that's about her money, isn't it?
I don't think that's a bad price. I thought she was about the worst price favourite of any race at Cheltenham going into the Christmas period. I now almost think she's the most overpriced horse for Cheltenham.
Yeah, I think 7 to 1
it's been a wild overreaction to the Christmas hurdle.
7 to 1 is we should cause a bit of discomfort, I think. Right, let's listen to Willie Mullins, because it was interesting to hear him over the course of 48 hours immediately react to Lossiemouth, then go home, watch it, think about it, have a look at a few metrics. 2 days later, talking to Gary O'Brien, he said this.
If you remember the Triumph Hurdle, she ran away with Paul off the top of the hill, hit the front. She was always very keen. So all our training has been to settle her back. Every race we've been settling her and teaching her to settle rather than having her as free as she was as a juvenile. So I'd say when she jumped off the other day, she hasn't gone that pace early on in a race since the Triumph Hurdle, and she was just caught flat-footed. I love the way she stayed on the whole way to the winning lane. And a few people telling me that it's the first time Constitution Hill had to get a slapper to wake him up. To me, I thought she has every opportunity now to fall out of the back of the television, and she didn't. She stayed on. She'd come home fine. And just the next day we run, we might just give her a good sharp bit of work beforehand, and it'll be up to Paul then to settle her in the race. But I think over a different track, Kempton is sharp and flat, and she's won twice around Cheltenham. Sorry, Kempton is sharp and flat. Cheltenham is a different stage, and she'll be, I think, a bigger threat come Cheltenham.
3.
Yes.
She's won 3 times around Cheltenham, hasn't she?
Are you going to also tell him that he has had a smack before, Constitution Hill as well?
Yeah, well, he's right, though, effectively, isn't he? It's really interesting, that, isn't it? I'm really glad that he made that journey, as you'd expect a brilliant trainer to do.
He didn't really back off sticking with the champion immediately afterwards either.
No, he didn't. And that's why I said, when people were saying, oh, you know, back to square one, she's not good enough, you can't hold that position and say she wasn't at her best. They don't meld together. You either think one or the other.
Let's take a look at the ground that is likely to happen for the champion hurdle. And this was a good exercise for me, because I had in my head that it's been testing ground on the first day of Cheltenham for ages, whereas actually it's only been the last 2 years.
I can't even remember that it was heavy ground first day last year's Cheltenham. I'm glad you put this up.
It's just useful to remember, and we'll be looking at how the ground changes for the Champion Chase and the Gold Cup later on in the show as well. Let's have a look at the Mares' Hurdle betting now. I found the non-runner no-bet angle for Lossiemouth at 5 to 4 quite interesting. This is on anti-post terms, however, with Brighterdaysahead and Lossiemouth both at 6 to 4. Now, isn't the payoff of having a great mares programme that means more quality mares are running? Aren't we going to get a little present in that one of these mares is going to go the Champion Hurdle? They're not going to run against each other, are they?
I think they'll both end up in the Champion Hurdle.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I actually do. I do.
I hope you're right.
I'm pretty sure it's incontrovertible now that Lossiemouth is the #1 Willie Mullins contender for the Champion Hurdle. Well, unless what's he called? The one that Ruby...
Amsterdam.
Yeah. Well, you know, he's the joker in the pack, I suppose. But as things stand, Lossiemouth is their #1 contender. That's the way they've got a point. And surely, Brighterdaysahead, if you put up a performance of that magnitude, even Michael O'Leary suggested it. I think they'll both end up in the Champion Hurdle. You heard it. You didn't hear it here first, but...
And if State Man bounces back, what does Paul Townend do?
I think he'll end up on Lossiemouth. I'd be amazed if he didn't.
I do too. I'd be amazed otherwise. Right, OK. In passing, when we're talking about Brighterdaysahead, Golden Ace got a few entries. Well, she had her second start of the season on New Year's Day, and this is what happened in the Rock Hill.
Yeah, she ran OK. She finished 3rd. She's at the back here, held up in a tempo-dictated race. I don't think she jumps very well when she's not really going fast enough and is engaged enough. Plus the fact the ground would have been a bit soft for her, maybe. I think she's a bit of Goldilocks as regards the ground. I think she wants just the easy side of good, sort of spring nice ground without it being too quick. But she's got loads of pace. Pace is her asset. This is just the wrong type of race for her. Spoke to Jeremy Scott today. She's going to be dropped back to 2 miles, either in the Betfair Hurdle off a mark of 144, which I don't think's too stiff, or potentially in the Kingwell Hurdle. But you'd want a rival in there to go fast enough for her.
I like the idea of her going to 2 miles in the Betfair Hurdle. Now, there is Lucky Place. Behind the other blue and yellow is Langadan. These are potentially heading towards the stairs. That's Silver. Oh, taking a nosedive at the last. I was relieved to hear he was OK. Lucky Place is a Stayers Hurdle candidate?
Well, you don't know whether 3 miles is going to bring about improvements in him, but look at the way he carries himself and gallops. He's pretty dur, isn't he? And I know Gowl Road is a professional runner-up, but he is tough, and to just keep grinding out past him, it does make you think that he probably ought to get 3 miles.
And Langadan just folded from the home turn.
Move on.
Yeah, OK, I shall. I'm going to move on to the Savills Hurdle at Leopardstown. This was won by Home by the Lead. There he is highlighted.
Well, it's an amazing horse, isn't he?
Second time he's won this.
I know, second time he's won this. He quite likes Leopardstown. He loves Navan, but although as the pace picks up, he comes off it a little bit, he's travelled broadly much more sweetly through this race. We'll compare him to old Noble Yates, who's travelling like Home of the Lee quite often has done in his career.
From the first hurdle, he didn't like it.
Exactly. So Home of the Lee's now gone much more sweetly through 2 consecutive races. He was third to Tupou in last year's Stayers Hurdle when he was blinkered for the first time. And he just seems a sweeter horse this season. I don't think 8-10 to 1 for the Stayers Hurdle is bad value about Home of the Lee.
Yeah, he lost his position there as others were travelling more sweetly past him. Typically Bob Bollinger, also Sandock Lagan, who didn't seem to find a great deal. Yeah, I think he's a player. I think he can run creditably. I just can't see him winning. He kind of, in a stop-start pace for the Stayers Hurdle, he got found out and then sort of stayed on last year.
They're all within a kind of, Tupou apart, they're all within a pound of each other, aren't they, really?
Well, then there's Crambo as well, who's now won 2 long
Crambo,
walks.
Hidden Valley Lake.
But he's quite interesting, isn't he? Hidden Valley Lake to some degree?
Same ownership, of course, as at Tupou.
Yes.
And Bob Bollinger.
Yes.
So the Atchisons have probably got the good idea as to what it's going to take to win this year's race. Brilliant training performance by Fergal O'Brien to get Crambo to come back and win the long walk hurdle. And if freshness is a thing, they're not going to make too many mistakes this time, are they? They'll just go straight there. Yeah,
they did think that hard races at Haydock and in the long walk last year meant that he left his Stayers Hurdle behind. But Tupou remains at the top as Hardender's favourite after a Christmas at home with the family.
That second favourite is pretty depressing, isn't it?
It is really, really depressing, Ballyman. I just can't have that. I mean, I can see Corbett's Cross switching to staying hurdling. I can see Buddy One doing it after what they did over Christmas. I cannot have Ballyburn like so many people out there.
I don't understand that as a theory. You know, he made a hash of the final fence at Kempton, and everything was happening too quickly for him behind what could end up being one of the best 2-mile chasers we've seen, you know, for quite a while. I really wouldn't be giving up on his chasing career on that basis, and he should end up in the Brown Advisory and near as damn it win it.
Yeah, all of that, the other theory, rubbish. Right, that is our spin through the hurdlers and what's been going on over the festive period. When you rejoin us, we'll be talking about the chasers.
From Gold Cups to Grand Nationals and derbies to Desert Orchid. The latest big races to the famous clashes of the past. Racing TV's YouTube channel has it all, with thousands of great videos to be enjoyed right now. Watch memorable feature shows from Racing TV's back catalogue again. Catch up on episodes of popular shows that you might have missed when shown on the channel. Enjoy insight and tips, or just sit back and enjoy watching thrilling replays of some of your favourite races from the last 20 years. Simply head to YouTube, search for Racing TV and hit subscribe. With Racing TV on YouTube, you'll never be far away from watching another great race.
And we start where else with the Savills chase, and Galopin Deschamps on his manner, turning away his younger stable companion Factor File.
He just loves Leopardstown, doesn't he? And he can do it on ground that isn't soft,
Hallelujah.
Too. You only had to watch him as a hurdler around Punchestown and Cheltenham when the going was on top, and he was good there. He's just a proper horse, isn't he? Dual Gold Cup winner, multiple Grade 1 winner, brilliant here, just dominant at every stage of the race.
He didn't go as hard as I was expecting him to. He was positively ridden, which I think is a key to him. I think he must be ridden in this way. And you can see that factor file Mark Walsh mentions afterwards that he's a bit too fresh, and this is a mistake.
Yeah, so he just wasn't concentrating.
Seemingly not. He just sort of, you know, crashed through it. And meanwhile, Galopin de Champs was controlling this, a stayer from the front, controlling the fractions.
And a little out to his right factor file as well, as he had been actually when he beat Gelly Warrior in that match last year at Leopardstown.
It's how he does it. It doesn't bother me for Cheltenham necessarily.
No, it doesn't bother me. I mean, he was brilliant there last year. I asked Dan Barber of Timeform whether this was close to Galopin des Champs' career best performance, and he said no, because last year he'd beaten Jerry Colomb by as many lengths as you like. But on much softer ground, it's going to be much easier to post a performance of that authority. I thought on a sound surface, defeat of the horse that had been billed as the most exciting young chaser in training, with some good solid horses well behind him. I didn't think this was too far short of his best at all.
I don't think it was too far short. He certainly powered through the line and proved hard to pull up. There are his fond connections getting so excited. It's great to see. There were some amazing scenes in the winner's enclosure afterwards, wasn't it?
There were. Audrey Turley absolutely adores this horse.
It was lovely to see her
But frankly, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, that was so good to see. I think, well, I agree that it wasn't up there with his first Gold Cup or his Savills Chase of last year. In terms of consistency, achieving a high bar regularly, I feel he's been the best consistently since Quarto Star. Denman's got some peaks that are higher.
And isn't it interesting how unforgiving we are of a comeback in the John Durkan? It's 2.5 miles,
yes,
and it's your first run of the season. You know, habitually that would always be a pipe opener of sorts. You can't be expected to turn up and just scoot clear in a race like that and then just dominate the 3 mile or 3.25 mile real staying division.
I'm really kicking myself because immediately after that he was pushed out to 5 to 1. 5 to 1? It was just weird that after the John Durkan. Now let's analyse Factor File and what happened to him. This is what Mark Walsh had to say, and we also have tagged on what Willie Mullins had to say in response.
Sure, we know Galopin des Champs like around here, but I just thought, well, I'd done too much during the race. He never really dropped it. And you're not going to be Galopin des Champs by doing that, so hopefully he learns to relax and we'll give him another go.
One notable mistake as well, kind of going away from the stands. Would you kind of attribute that to the freshness?
It was, for some reason, after jumping the first, he just got in my hands even more, and he just raced blind down to it and just grabbed at it. Well, he's going to have to settle to beat him.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
He has the ability.
He has the ability, but if he doesn't settle, he's not going to beat him.
OK. Do you think he can settle that?
Well, I'll try.
You're the man for the job.
I'll try.
He was quite settled in his early days, I think. For his bumper here, he was too settled, and I think I took all the gear off. I just let him run in just an ordinary snaffle bit after that for a while. So maybe it's time to maybe put some gear back on him, but it'd be hard to see him breaking the gap going another 2 furlongs, wouldn't it?
And that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, but one horse is established and you know exactly what he is. Surely, Factor File, there is still improvement in him.
Undoubtedly.
And so I think it's very, very early to be giving up and saying, can't win that, stick him somewhere else.
It's more the extra 2.5 miles point that
2.5 furlongs, yeah.
2.5 furlongs, sorry, that I take. Yeah, I think, you know, the Gold Cup, really, he relishes that trip, and very few horses do whilst having the tactical speed and ability that he has.
If Willie Mullins puts hood, earplugs, whatever, and Factor File drops the bit and settles and gets into a rhythm, you know he's got the tactical speed to be there in a Gold Cup. That's not going to be the problem. And that's what's the problem for most horses. And then you're asking the equipment or greater maturity to eke out the extra stamina. And the way he hit the line in the Brown Advisory, I wouldn't be giving up on him for the Gold Cup at all.
OK.
I'm feeling in a very forgiving mood.
You are.
Today.
You are. It's unusual. Let's find out what the roadies have to say about where Factor File should be campaigned. We asked you that.
Wow.
They're like a Ryanair.
I think the roadies are just very efficient, ruthless, unsentimental, and look at this in a clinical way.
I can't imagine why you would say that. Let's see what James had to say. He's of the Ted Walsh view.
No one bred a horse to win. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas Andrew is all over the Ryanair. And Nick Scallon thinks that he jumps better over the shorter distance. He was jumping poor the other day because Mark Walsh had to keep slamming the brakes on him. I don't see that.
Well, Mark Walsh did intimate that, didn't he? The fact that he made the mistake because he was too fresh and wasn't concentrating. And that fence going away from the stands at Leopardstown is a notoriously tricky fence, isn't it?
One mistake.
Yeah, one mistake, exactly. Yeah. But I think there is something in that.
OK.
But why won't he settle? You know, why ultimately will he not settle better anyway? Because Willie Mullins will get him to.
It's just that final 2.5 furlongs. Right. We had, on New Year's Day, the return of Monty's star, Butnick. He was beaten by Embassy Gardens, who was also returning.
We're going to work backwards from the Gold Cup, has been Henry de Bromhead's mantra for, 8 months with Monty's star. And a lot of this race, he did a lot right. He jumped well, if a little airily at times. And it just looked to me like a first run of the season. First run for a long time.
He did a lot of that out jumping Minella Crooner.
And Minella Crooner's the pale colours on the inside. And Embassy Gardens got a nice soft lead on ground that he probably really enjoyed.
I also think he likes to boss a field, Embassy Gardens. I think that allows him to get into a rhythm.
Given Henry de Bromhead's brilliance at getting horses conditioned for the Cheltenham Festival particularly, given his context as regards winning Gold Cups with Minella, Indo and Aplutar, I'm still loath to completely rule this horse out as an outsider with a shot.
On this point, I definitely agree, particularly as last season against top novices, including Factorfile, he never really got an end-to-end gallop over 3 miles. I think he will like an extended 3-mile, 2-furlong race, such as this race, for example.
The form book says he can't, but the betting also says that there are only 3 horses with more compelling credentials, Galopin des Champs, Factorfile and Jerry Colon.
There's a couple I think that there might have been an overreaction to, but we'll talk about that in a few moments' time. Here's a reminder of what the ground has tended to be like at Cheltenham. Now, interestingly, from day one, on 6 occasions in the last 10 years, the ground has changed a point or two. 3 times it's got drier, 3 times it's got softer, and that's what they faced on the day, on the Friday, of course, switching course as well.
And the Gold Cup itself is the first steeplechase run on the Friday, and they open up that fresh ground round the inside. So you're always going to expect something slightly better and slightly nicer than what you had on the Thursday. And a different course to the Tuesday and Wednesday course.
And here's the Ryanair betting. If you're thinking about Factorfile, the King George winner is top of Paddy Power's anti-post market there at 4-1.
This is quite an interesting race to have a bet in, isn't it?
What do you like?
And I know time is against us, but Banbridge could go Gold Cup, couldn't he? Factorfile, I think, will still end up in the Gold Cup. Gaelic Warrior will run in the Champion Chase. El Fabiolo, well, we don't know where he's going to run, if anywhere. Il Était Temps on the sidelines. John Bond will run in the Champion Chase. Grey Dawning,
I would have thought he went in the Gold Cup, but not
thought
necessarily.
So. Spillans Tower might end up here.
I think that's a good one.
And Il Est Français will end up in the Champion Chase. So find the runners in the Ryanair is your game for the next 3 months.
I think that's a really interesting angle on Il Est Français. Now, we're going to have a look at the King George, but first of all, we're going to try and examine how it was run, because there were lots of different theories about that. And we've taken the 2023 Courteau Star, which was dominated by Il Est Français. That's on your left. And on your right is the King George, which was also, for much of the race, dominated by him.
Right, so the received wisdom is that on the right, James Reevely set off like a scalded cat on Il Est Français and had them gasping from a long way out. Well, the second part of that statement might be true, but the first isn't, as you see Grey Dawning make a terrible mistake at the first fence there on the right, because as you'll see in the 2023 Courteau Star Novices Chase, on ground that was officially, admittedly, slightly better, James Reevely is establishing a much longer lead over his rivals at a much earlier stage of the race.
Yes, and the crucial part is about to come up now, and it shows that James Reevely has really taken a breather on the right-hand side in the King George between fence 9 and fence 10.
Yes, so that's where he got the breather in, but he pressed the gas pedal again at exactly the same time, which was around about 4 out, to try and really turn the screw. And it worked in the Courteau Star against inferiors, and it worked against all bar Banbridge in the King George. And to me, that makes Banbridge's performance even more impressive, because Il Est Français, having been given the breather down the side by James Reevely, was slowing nowhere near as quickly as Received Wisdom, nor as quickly as James gave the impression he might have when he gave the quotes afterwards.
Absolutely. And I also wonder whether it sort of tells us what kind of form Il Est Français was in 2023 compared to perhaps what form he was in 2024. Would you say that's fair?
Maybe. I mean, he's beaten up much lesser horses in 2023.
Although Hermes Alain did run faster than any of the horses in the King George last year. Sadly, we never got to find out what he could do.
What I am excited about is that they want to go back to Kempton with Le Francais, perhaps to run him in the Coral-sponsored race in February, which used to be called the Racing Post Chase.
He will love that.
Yeah, he'll bolt up off a big weight, won't he?
It'll be fantastic for him.
And Timeform will be going, oh God, we can't rate this 194.
Master Oates, I remember Master Oates. What would you do with Le Francais? Would you go Ryanair or would you go Champion Chase, do the one-man idea?
Well, here's the thing. You see, as we looked at that, what pace would be contesting him in the Ryanair? Probably not very much. Whereas in the Champion Chase, he could have an Egerman and Gaelic Warrior taking him on.
Yeah, a couple of ones that you really wouldn't necessarily want to do that with. I tend to think Ryanair, but I'm not completely counting out the Champion Chase, and I understand from Noel George and Amanda Zetterholm that he'll get an entry in all 3 Grade 1s at the Cheltenham Festival. Right, let's have a look at the King George in greater detail. Now, first off, the grey horse, third from the right. This is where his race is lost right at the very start, Grey Dawning.
Yeah, can't do that in the King George, can you? And he's also on the outside because Harry Skelton then wants to give him a clear sight at his fences, understandably enough. And he actually does make some ground into the race late on, so I wouldn't be giving up on him, but obviously slightly back to the drawing board with him.
And how about Spillane's Tower? How do you feel about him?
Can't quite work it out. What I can't work out is why he didn't finish at least a good third, having made the ground to get there.
He just faded out of things, suggesting that he might not have stayed. Whereas Banbridge, there he is out the back, and Paul Tannen said that after jumping into the back of Spillane's Tower at the second, he was a bit further back than he wanted, but he was able to deal with this fast, slow pace. That's where Envoy Ellen sadly unseats Rachel Blackmore, and this is where Banbridge starts making his move forwards.
He's got lots of heart, this horse, and lots of class, and it's a really good training performance as well. It's been pointed out by much smarter people than me that Joseph O'Brien gave him the 2 runs over 2 miles, and they had a long premeditated plan, and it's paid off. He's come to the race and he's run as hard as he's ever run, and he's finished off really strongly. And those finishing speed percentages tell you that Banbridge has actually performed with real credit here. He's had to show real pace and class. It's not just a race that's fallen apart.
Yes.
He's not just run down a horse that's slowing down in front of him.
And it's almost the Lossiemouth argument. He's been sharpened up by a run over 2 miles, a couple of runs over 2 miles, and that means he was able to deal with jumping at pace in the King George. He's come home strongly. Will he stay the Gold Cup trip?
I'd give it a go. I'm not sure, but I'd give it a go.
Why wouldn't you give it a go?
Exactly.
Right. 2-milers, we do need to talk about what happened when Solness got the perfect setup in the Paddy's Rewards Chase at Leopardstown.
We do. A brilliant ride as well from man of the moment, JJ Slevin. Just got the Munir Swed job. But just keep your eye on as Solness is allowed to bowl along out front, himself jumping slightly to the right, by the way, what Gaelic Warrior is doing in behind. He's following him out to the right, as he normally does, and he's ridden further back here on his first run of the season than often he is when he's absolutely on song. I thought his real price before this race was probably about 4 to 6, and he's gone off, what, 13 to 8? The market suggested that he wasn't ready to run his absolutely biggest and best race, and I think that's the way it panned out.
I think he's run really creditably.
So do I.
And I think particularly with the ground tending as it was at Leopardstown this week, on the sounder side, over 2 miles, I think it probably does perhaps not see him at his absolute best. If we do have a bit more of a testing Queen Mother Champion Chase and he can be ridden in the way that you describe, I think he's still a major player. Yeah,
and a lot's been made during his career his inability to go left-handed. Well, he's won at Leopardstown at the Dublin Racing Festival. He's won an Arkle, and broadly speaking, despite running down the final flight or fence both times, he's generally jumped straighter when he's been lined up positively and ridden toward the front, and he's then on his A game, keen, and you tend to find those tendencies to edge out to the right dissipate somewhat.
Let's have a look at the ground that he can expect to face. The ground has changed from day one a couple of times, both of Energumend years, actually. One went drier, one went softer. Marine Nationale would want it a different way around to Gaelic Warrior.
Well, one day he's going to pop up in a big race at a big price, isn't he? Because all the talents there could easily do.
Punchestown. So here is the betting for the Queen Mother Champion Chase, which has John Bon, who again has been eating quality streets all Christmas. He has hardened as favourite at 2-1, but I'm still giving Gaelic Warrior every chance.
Recommend one bet this whole show. I would say Gaelic Warrior for the Queen Mother Champion Chase. He'll be ready by then, and he'll be a completely different horse. El Fabiolo, by the way, Simon Mania is saying to me today that they're trying to get him back for the DRF, but it's not definite, and then they might go up in trips.
So he might not get to the DRF?
He might not get to the DRF.
How interesting. Well, I will add your bet to the Road to Cheltenham list, Nick.
You don't need to do that.
I will do.
It's enough just to have been fraudulently in this seat for a week. It's been a lot of fun.
Very much enjoyed your company. Thank you very much for the input.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching it. If you need more, the column, as usual, is on the website. We are not back next Thursday, although Ruby will be with me. We are on Sunday week at Punchestown before racing with a Road to Cheltenham special, and we'll have a special guest. Thank you, though, for watching this edition with Nick. We very much enjoyed it.
A proper special guest next time.
I hope you have too. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.